Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to the IDM. It's really nice to see such a full room. So especially warm welcome to the Czech school who is attending the panel discussion today. And I'd like to hand straight over to Gerhard Marchl, who is head of the Department for European Politics at the Karl Institute, to take over the welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. A warm welcome also from my side on behalf of the Karl Institute. Yeah, it's a great pleasure that we have so many audience here in the room and hopefully also via Zoom and YouTube. This event belongs to a well-established series of events that we organize together, the IDM that has the lead and Campus Tivoli of the ÖVP. In these events, we focus on the situation in the forefront or the aftermath of parliamentary elections in Central, Eastern and Southeastern European countries. And this reflects the special interests these three institutions have in the region. And especially also Austria has in this region. The elections in Czech Republic are crucial. As it stands now, and if we can believe the polls, the center-right government of Prime Minister Petr looks set to lose its majority. As it stands now, Andrej Babiš and his populist, Eurosceptic ANO party are expected to return to power. And of course, several questions are linked to that shift in power. The big questions are, for instance, can Babiš form a stable government? Will President Pavel accept him as prime minister? Who will join him in a coalition, the far right, the leftist bloc, led by the communists, or even the motorists? What kind of foreign policy can we expect from a government led by Andrej Babiš? Will it be a pragmatic course, or will we see an alignment with Orban and Fico? All these questions matter, and our panelists will discuss these and many more elements linked to the elections in Czech Republic. The Czech Republic is also an important partner for Austria. It's one of the closest partners and neighbors of our country. It belongs to our top trading partners. We share deep historical, diplomatic and political ties, for instance, in the Austerlitz format, together with Slovakia. We are very pleased that we have excellent speakers at this event. Let me briefly introduce them to you. We have Kamila Bogdanova from the IDM fellow, who will also present her briefing. We have Petr Kaniok, who is professor at the Department of International Relations and European Affairs at Masaryk University in Brno. And we have Pavel Havlíček, research fellow at the Association for International Affairs, AMO, a think tank in Prague. A warm welcome. So let me thank our cooperation partners, the IDM, especially Sebastian Schäfer, Thorne, and Kamila Bogdanova, and Campus Tivoli, especially Laura Bali, for the good cooperation we always have. Having said this, I wish you a fruitful debate, an interesting event, and I hand back to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerhard, for the welcome and introduction. And now I'd like to hand it over to Kamila for the briefing.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Kamila Bogdanova, and I'm IDM Fellow. And today is my biggest pleasure to be here among distinguished experts and diverse audience we have today. And firstly, before we go deeply about political landscape, about parties, campaigns, and programs, some formalities and numbers need to be mentioned. So please, the first slide. Czech elections are around the corner, so already this Friday and Saturday, Czechs will go to the polls, and these elections will decide on the new government and the new prime minister. The deputies are elected for a 4-year term and in proportional voting system. A single party must obtain at least 5% of the vote. The coalition of 2 parties must at least obtain 7%, and the coalition of 3 or more parties requires 11%. That's about numbers. Interesting part about campaign is coming soon. This year, as we can see, 26 political entities are running for these elections with 4,463 candidates. The youngest candidate is 21 years old, the oldest is 90 years old. Women represent 31% of all candidates. So that's a brief general information about the elections. And please, the next slide. Some background information will be necessary before we dive deep in the current elections. So the elections results from 2021 finished with the Spolu won the elections with 27.79. ANO finished second. Then the Pirati-Stan alignment finished third, and the fourth finished SPD. However, interestingly, to mention that although the Spolu coalition won the elections, however, they obtained less seats than the ANO. And due to the preferential voting, the Pirates obtained only 4 seats, and the candidates from the Stan party obtained 33 seats. So now we move on to the interesting part about political parties and the program. So please, the next slide. Here you can see the table with the 7 parties that are most likely to enter the parliament, most likely to obtain at least 5% threshold. So although there are 26 political entities are running for elections, it's unfortunately very time constraining to mention all of the other entities. So let's start with the first ANO movement. Next slide, please. This is the main billboards, and their political campaign is sort of funny. What is the program mainly focuses, of course, on living costs and promises in a shift in economic policy towards lower taxes, cheaper energy, faster housing delivery. Although they are not rejecting the Green Deal, they are simply offering the reformation of the EU Green Deal. As you can see, visuals and slogans are sounding as everything should be cheaper, simpler for households. That's shortly about ANO party. The next party is Coalition Spolu together, which consists of the Civic Democrats, Christian Democrats, and Top Nula David party. As we can see on the logos and the billboards, the campaign is rather against, let's sort of say, the Communist Party, against the ANO party, opposition party. What they promised is the freedom, they promised the alignment, stricter alignment with the EU and NATO. They also, the program focused on regular spending reviews and discipline public finances, support for small and medium enterprises, and of course, quicker housing solutions. The next party I would like to talk is Starostové, mayors and independents. These Starostové represent the Dobrý program, a good program, where they focus on pragmatic delivery, regular spending reviews, as well as disciplined public finances, support for small and medium enterprises, innovation, quicker housing, as well as efficient use of EU funds, better regional services, and they are pro-European, pro-NATO orientation. And also, if there is of any possibility, they consider adoption of euro. The next party I would like to talk about is Freedom Direct Democracy Movement, SPD. As you can see in their billboards, placards, it's very anti-Ukraine sentiments, anti-illegal migration sentiments. This is the main point. The party is planning to, if they win the election, they're planning to introduce the referendum on law, referendum on EU and NATO. And together, the SPD joined a memorandum with the Tricolor Party of Free Citizens, and PRO on their SPD lists. The next party is Pirate Party, Pirati, or Piratska strana. They are running mostly on technocratic pro-European platform. They offer affordable housing, fair taxation, a strong anti-corruption push. Also, what they stand strong for unified digital portal to erase bureaucracy. On energy, they argue for modernization, green policies, and focus on rather modernization than short-term solutions. Foreign policy is clear with pirates. They are pro-European and pro-NATO with continued support to Ukraine. They also promise 100 days program where they would like to focus on transparency measures, housing push, and state modernization. The next slide, please, is Enough, Stachilo movement. This movement emerged from a left-wing alliance, is now a party led by Kateřina Konečná. In August, the movement Stachilo signed a memorandum with the Social Democrats since then. So they are together on the candidate list. The program centers around of course, cost of living, cheaper food, cheaper housing, expanding social protections with a bigger role of the state in key sectors. In foreign policy, they have quite a stricter approach towards EU and NATO. They, the main campaign message is anti-establishment and, of course, welfare first. And the next part is the motorists for themselves, motoristi sobě. They brand themselves as a practical pro-driver alternative that wants lower costs for households, fewer rules, as they see it as anti-car. They are strongly opposed to the Green Deal. They argue for cheaper fuel and energy, simple permits for housing, and this kind of agenda. For 2025 elections, they are running on their own without the Přísaha party. So we'll see how the oath, the Přísaha, will end in the end. The next slide, please. So this is shortly about the main parties. And also what was interesting to observe is the recent mock elections, student elections initiative that was organized by One World for Schools by People in Need. And these mock elections were held in secondary schools. So here are the results. This polo is the winner, then comes Pirati, Stan, Motoriste, Ano. What is also interestingly to note is that in the secondary vocational schools, the students are prone to vote for more Motoriste party or more far-right parties rather than in secondary high schools. And the next slide, please. Opinion polls. The most fresh ones I got yesterday from the STEM Institute for Empirical Research. As for now, ANO shows that it's in the first place. This poll comes second in the low 20s. We were observing this summer some shifts between SPD and STAN, but now the SPD seems to be the third, and comes STAN, and Pirates, Motoriste are expected to highly enter the parliament, but of course it all be seen at the end of elections. And that's all for me for now, and I hope that we will dive deeper about the programs, political parties, and also the main electoral pre-election atmosphere in the country. Thank you very much, and I wish us a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Kamila, for the excellent briefing. And yes, so our panelists have already been introduced. My name is Rebecca Thorne. I'm happy to be moderating discussion. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I'm going to start with you, Pavel. Can you tell us how have voter priorities shifted since the last elections?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and having this discussion. Actually, it's a really great pleasure to be here with you in Vienna, but also to discuss what many Czechs consider really an important vote, actually, that is coming up. Each vote is characterized as historic. We'll see how much this one will be, but in any case, it's actually something that these elections come after 4 years of the governance of Petr and a change to the previous course, in which in both cases Andrej Babiš was in power, in one time as the prime minister, before as the minister of finance. So this was a period of change, actually, this past 4 years. And of course, let's start with the important question, how things have been changing, actually, over the past years. And you mentioned about the shift on the side of the electorate, on the society. And I think it's really important to speak about what has happened over the past 4 years, because as also representatives of the government often remind, they entered into offices at a moment at the end of 2021 when things were looking much different. It was still before the full-scale invasion, which fundamentally changed the overall dynamics in the country. It was the time when they were coming up with quite a strong socio-economic program as countering what was then called Babišova drahota, so things being expensive because of Babiš. So that was one of the slogans in which actually they were sort of on which they were positioning. Now, 4 years after, you have exact same slogan, but attributed to the current government. So things are attributed quite naturally to the sitting government, basically, also for the socio-economic hardship. And of course, when speaking how much things changed, we cannot forget about the major impact of the Russian war against Ukraine that had on the country and on the whole region. I dare to say, actually, it is, I already started speaking about the socio-economic implications. We can discuss about the major energy crisis that hit the country very, very hard in 2022. Actually, especially the autumn period was a very turbulent time, and many people felt it on their standard of living, actually, very profoundly. It was both the costs of basic energy, prices at petrol stations. It was the inflation that really skyrocketed as a result of the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine. And people indeed started really protesting in autumn 2022 and started reflecting on this overall situation. Of course, we cannot ask, okay, how much that government had to do with this, how much they inherit that, or how much that was actually thrown at them. Actually, that was something that has been one of the questions actually around us. But of course, and I think Kamila spoke about it very interestingly, so that this is also something that has become one of the big topics of this campaign. What is the bread and butter actually of the life in Czechia? are people living better than they used to be 4 years ago? This is one of the big topics actually, and this is actually also something that actually Andrej Babiš has been really addressing very, very fiercely, saying, look, this government failed you. Pointing to all of the problems that we see more of polarization, we see more of socio-economic divide in the country, we see also regional divisions actually within the country, and these are all opportunities for people like Andrej Babiš, but also other parts of the current opposition when attacking in the political domain, attacking the current establishment actually. So when speaking about the shifting priorities of the citizens of the society, this really needs to be taken into consideration. But at the same time, I cannot but also underscore how much also the geopolitical landscape has shifted, and how much more attention is needed now actually, and what have been really happening over the past couple of weeks, where we've been all really following the developments in the east of Poland, and the drones really one of the 19 of the drones that entered the airspace of Poland actually landed just around 100 kilometers actually from the border, right? So that's actually something that deeply affects us. And I didn't quite mention before when speaking about the socioeconomic implications of the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine. But of course, to accept and process the temporary protection of Ukraine refugees of more than 500,000 people. I counted once, and it actually constituted at the point more than 4% of the Czech society. So that's really something for a country of 10.5 million, similar size to Austria. That's really something very profound. I don't know the figures for Austria, but I know that by far Czechia, together with Poland and Germany, are the leading nations actually hosts of Ukraine refugees. So that's also something that we also need to take into consideration. So the geopolitical reality really striking back, on us, and I dare to say actually that over the past couple of weeks, that has been actually beneficial for the current government, when seeing and very clearly pointing, look, we have drones entering the airspace of Poland. We have MiGs entering the airspace of Estonia, rockets falling on the territory of Romania. We are really living in times of unprecedented crisis and security danger that is endangering the whole of eastern flank, to which many Czechs actually now feel much more connected than they used to be still 4 years ago. So when speaking also about shifting of priorities among the Czech electorate, of the Czech voters, this also cannot be forgotten. So I will probably highlight those two things. Probably there are many, many more. Petr will probably complement the picture, but these are the priorities that I see actually as playing really the number one, number two sort of roles and positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you touched on a lot of important issues there already. Petr, perhaps you'd like to add to that. And also, the economy has been mentioned. It's been dominating the public debate. I saw some statistics comparing Austria and Czech Republic, and inflation in the Czech Republic was considerably higher, and also the real wage growth in Czechia, it was so it still hasn't recovered fully since 2021. So maybe you can also shed some light on this, first of all, and also perhaps also a follow-up question. The parties have been proposing solutions. How have these solutions been received?
Okay, so many thanks. First, I would like to start with thank to Kamila for fantastic background, because this makes things quite easy for the discussion. And I think that from the background, we can have an impression that it's the economy, which is the key topic, and which is the key, I think, thing in the whole campaign. But basically, at least in my view, it's just the impression. Because if you look at the way how the parties, especially the Czech opposition political parties, how they have approached the economic issues. So in my view, in my impression, the approach is very simplistic. It's very superficial. So what you see is a huge critique of the current cabinet. You see that the parties as SPD or the Yes movement of Mr. Babiš. So these parties are heavily criticizing the current cabinet. But what is striking, what is surprising me is that they do not try to offer some kind of detailed solutions. So basically, what they made or what they have managed to, and in which would that they like have succeed is that they have created a kind of impression that a huge majority of the Czech society, huge groups of the Czech voters are suffering. So basically, it's the dominant kind of impression which is in the Czech current, I would say, discussion, which is widespread in the Czech society. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the facts, it's not the true. So it's not the case. It's not the case that a huge majority of Czech would be in a situation that they would be suffering, that they like would be poor. And basically, in this, I think that the Czech opposition is trying to do the same thing as we saw in Slovakia in the case of the most recent parliamentary election, when Mr. Fico, he managed to create the same impression, the same kind of feeling that a huge part of Slovak society is suffering, and that a huge part of the Slovak society is living in poverty. The second thing which I would like to say or to make a kind of a comment is that if you look like beneath this, I would say, general impression, you see surprising lack of proposal or solutions. So basically, it is just the feeling that like we are suffering, and it's the current cabinet, and in some cases, it's of course the European Union, it's the Ukrainians who we should blame for this, but you hardly see some kind of a detailed proposal or solutions like how we could do the things differently. And the third point is that the whole electoral discussion, the whole campaign is totally omitting the big and I think challenging topic as the taxes or as the pension reform, which is something which you would expect in the light of facts, like the composition of the Czech society, the situation at the light labor market. So the discussion is in terms of how the discussion is covering the issues that are connected with economy. As I said in the beginning, is very is in my view at least, it's very simplified and is lacking a level of details which I think we should have there.
Thank you very much. So the economy is very important. There are also some other issues that are part of the that are affecting the electorate and influencing the campaign. So, for example, the EU, NATO, the EU Green Deal, and you introduced the parties in your briefing. So we have Stachelo on the left and SPD Motoristi on the right. And they all appear to be EU, anti-EU, anti-NATO, anti-Green. So what are the main differences between them apart from this, and what should we be looking out for?
Yeah, great question, because it might seem confusing a bit, because they seem to be offered the same measures against EU, against NATO, but I think it's very important to differentialize what exactly each party and movement is offering. And what I highlighted for myself is that for example, the enough that your left populist movement, they firstly put attention at welfare first, price control, stronger state role, and the most skeptical towards EU and NATO, to my opinion. They're communist party figures in this movement, although cooperation with the Social Democrats seems quite vague. We'll see. But this is shortly about statute. What is interesting about SPD National Conservatives, what they put first is the sovereignty, migration, security. They want a nationwide referendum law that would enable votes on staying in EU, NATO. They strictly reject the EU Green Deal, the EU Migration Pact, and they also prioritize nuclear energy, domestic energy, rather instead of green energy. What I would like to highlight about Motoristi Subia, they're pro-driver protest party, I would call so. They highlight mostly everyday costs for commuters and small and medium enterprises, fewer anti-car rules. I would say that if I would summarize it in short, that Statio talks prices and the state, SPD talks borders and sovereignty, and Motoriste talks cars, rules, and bills.
Thank you. That's a great summary. So they're rather more extreme parties.
Anti-establishment.
Anti-establishment. Yeah. And so why the people who are upset with the current government, why are they voting for these parties, and why aren't they voting for or for Babiš, of course? I mean, he's leading the polls. Why are they voting for him, for these extreme parties, and not for Stan or for Pirati, Pavel?
Thank you, Rebecca. It's actually really interesting because Kamila did one very interesting experiment, and to show us actually 4 years back what were the results was actually a small mistake because Babiš got 70, it was 72 mandates, he got 70, so it was one fewer than the coalition, and by that he actually recognized, okay, you won, you got one mandate more, so I cannot even aspire go for the prime minister seat. So he got 70 mandates. The current polls shows between 68 to 72 maybe. So Babiš is about the same level. So it's not him that has changed actually. It's the overall landscape that really changed. We spoke about maybe some of the reasons why, but definitely what is something that is new is the extent of the level of fragmentation of the political scene. If we actually see all the subjects that you mentioned actually in the parliament, there will be not maybe 5 political subjects, but there will be maybe 20 of those parties. Why? Because actually it's Stačilo, several small parties. It's a similar situation as, for example, in Slovakia when the Slovak nationalists, they compose of different parties or even personalities. So that's actually what has been fundamentally different from 4 years ago. So we have a really very diverse scene in that respect, and the political extremes, both left and right, they are, I would dare to say, a bit stronger also when compared to 4 years ago. If you put the figures together again, you have the new element with motorists. So that's at least the 5% difference. So many people say, look, the extreme forces in Czechia, they have been always between 15 to 20%. They are now with motorists more than that. They are over 20% nowadays. So that's actually how the polarization, the societal polarization, and some level of dissatisfaction with this government has pronounced itself actually on the polls so far, not on the results, but on the polls so far. So we will see the final result. But that's actually what you are asking yourself, Rebecca. It's very important. Okay, so why don't people dissatisfied with the government go to pirates? Well, because pirates were part of the problem, might be part of the solution for some, but they only left the government several months ago. So it's not for some, a credible alternative to the current ruling parties. It used to be 5-party government. It's now 4-party government. And the rift, and I think that we are also entering what's quite normal in other European countries, that we see this very strong rift and rupture between two sides of the political spectrum. And here, what are the current ruling parties? Together with pirates, they are still, for many, considered to be a bloc, sort of. They are different colors, they are different shades, but they are part of the one solution, so to say. And then there is the other pool, from which Babiš, together with the extremes, are recruiting for potentially creating the other bloc. I might be oversimplifying this, but for many voters, it stands exactly like that. So there are very few people, yes, it exists, from the current ruling parties that they switch, for example, to Babiš. He campaigns on this, the disillusion of the voters, for example, and that's why in this electoral program there is so little said about Ukraine, for example. He doesn't want to go and criticize Ukraine very openly, actually, because he also campaigns on, as he likes to say, all catch-all party, of course, this is what we are. So he's also trying to get the disillusioned voters from the current ruling party government, to his ranks, and he's definitely considered the less extreme option, similarly to motorists. So I would still, if you compare the three anti-systemic movements, I would still say, look, Statulo and SPD, these are from left to right, actually, very strongly anti-systemic. They're really trying to go back really many decades ago in some of the regions that they have, actually before 1999, even, when also questioning the sort of 1990s return to Europe. Petr can talk at length probably about that. But these are really stronger revisionist parties, whereas Motoristen, they are closer probably to Babiš. They are also positioning very strongly against this establishment. It's also quite natural. They are out of the political landscape so far, so they need to also sort of punch their way through. But they are, when compared with the two others, they are probably less of the extreme here. But of course, if you consider these two blocks, then the migration between the two blocks is relatively limited. So that's so we see bigger transitions in between the blocks rather than across the two blocks. So that's actually something that also I think it's necessary. So for example, in that regard, definitely it has helped the Pirate Party that it left the government. They are really going quite steeply up. The latest polls, as Kamila showed, they are already, some of the polls actually show them higher than, for example, the mayor's Stan movement. They are doing quite a successful campaign and also partnering with the Greens and so on. So there are a lot of positive things, and also they can distance a little bit, from the current establishment. But everybody understands that they would not be a logical party for, I don't know, like, for example, far right party or even Babiš himself. So they would be very different, from where they stand in the practical doing everyday politics, so to say. So that's why we don't see actually so much. For example, going in, parties switching from the anti-establishment camp to pirates or something like that, because the rift has rather throughout the wider societal polarization got deeper than milder, actually. The rifts and divisions got deeper than it used to be 4 years ago. I'm deeply convinced about it, but Petr probably has a lot to that.
I just like to say, from my point of view, one important thing. So far, we have been speaking about the change, in terms of the voters, in terms of the strength of the parties. But basically, if we look back at the results of the last Czech national elections in 2021, it's not that big change if you take into account that in that time we had three parties which were close to the 5% threshold, which in the Czech system is a kind of value which you as a party have to get if you want to transform the votes into seat. And if you look at these three parties which were close to this 5%, as it was the Czech Communist, the Czech Social Democrats. So both of these parties were close to the 5% threshold, and the third one was 3.5.
Oh.
So in total, it would have been 14% of the votes. So basically, the protest voters, they had been there in these elections too, but for some reasons, and like one of them, and in my view, the most important, which is probably the most important difference, was the lack of cooperation. So basically, if you look at the current pattern of behavior in far left and far right, so whereas in 2021, these parties, they run using their own list. So in the current elections, they cooperate. So basically, if you look at the votes, if you look at the distribution of the votes in 2021, it's not that much different if it is compared with the distribution of the votes according to polls in this year. Like, what is the difference? Is the greater will of cooperation, which we see in both far left and far right, which makes the difference, and which probably and most likely will lead to a totally different result in this year. But we shouldn't forget that in 2021 the margin was small one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, but would you agree that because Pavel said that there's more polarization than there's the rift is deeper? Would you agree with that? And if so, then yeah, I mean, is it something new in Czechia, or is it something that's where you have noticed?
So I think basically it's something that has started in the Czech politics approximately in 2010, when we had the first elections that introduced a populist party into the Czech system. The party, it was called Renner, and it became immediately part of the cabinet. So the process of populism and polarization is definitely not something new in the Czech politics. From my point of view, the second important source of these processes was the introduction of the direct presidential election in 2014, because basically, if you have these mechanisms in the system as a new one, and basically this new mechanism, I think it was not a systematic part of the Czech constitutional processes. So this paddle led to a kind of strengthening the polarization, and basically I think we would find probably the same degree of this in the past 3 elections. So definitely it's not, in my view, in my perception, it's not something new. It's a kind of a pattern which has been rooted in the Czech politics at least for the past, I would say, 15 years.
Can I just maybe add one sentence? I wanted to agree with Petr, but add another layer to it. What I meant was really politics getting more brutal. You know?
Yeah.
When you have a prime minister of this country speaking about the alternative political cabinet on Sunday, it was about, as I will translate, about a potential government on national betrayal. That's actually a new way of brutality in the public discourse. You know, I remember still times when the current prime minister Petr was debating with Andrej Babiš still several weeks ago, and Andrej Babiš said, "Look, he's a decent man." You know, he wouldn't say that today. But I think politics today got more personalized, more brutal, sharper in terms of words. You know, there are fewer barriers, and this kind of that's what I meant by this polarization not being a new phenomenon for sure, but getting more brutal and deeper. Actually, that's what I manufactured.
One point, it might be the case, and this I would tend to agree with Pavel that the political discussion or the debate in Czechia is more polarized, it's more brutal. But if Mr. Fiala, if he has said that what may like happen in the Czech case is the cabinet of national betrayal, probably it's not a kind of brutality if he says so, because if we look at if we look at this possible change in terms of the focus of Czech foreign and European policy, probably it's true. Basically, if we look at the focus, if we look at the direction of the Czech foreign and European policy since 1993, when Czechia as a country was established, if you want to say so. So the focus on the West, the focus on the European Union, on the European integration, was a kind of an agreement which was there among the, I would say, like democratic mainstream political parties. But if you look at the changes, like with Mr. Babiš in his rhetoric and in the whole profile of his movement, which in the beginning, or like some 5 years ago, it was part of the European liberals. Since the last European elections, it's part of the patriots, which are totally different. And basically, if you look at the composition of a possible new cabinet, so what we may expect for sure if we have a new cabinet and if Mr. Babiš and some other opposition parties are part of it, we may expect a change in the Czech foreign and European policy. So I think this is one point which is sure. Because at the moment no one knows the results of the elections, so I think it is very difficult to predict how the future coalition will look like. But it will be definitely a different coalition. It will be definitely a different cabinet, and what, in my view, will definitely be different will be the focus and the direction of a Czech foreign and European policy. And in this sense, probably if you say that it's a kind of national betrayal, probably it's these words are too strong. But it would be a shake in one of the most important piles or part of a Czech, I would say, political identity since the 90s. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. So we have a lot of young people in this room. So Kamila, perhaps you could tell us a little bit. You showed how young people would vote generally, which parties they vote for, but what impact are they having on the election?
Interestingly, also in terms of polarization, I think with students, it's also a thing polarization, because also as the student election results show, they were diverging depending on what kind of school was the students were voting. Was it a secondary school or secondary vocational school, gymnasium?
Yes.
And they all differ, which is also interesting to observe. Also, the second point is, I read one article about the general overall mood of the young generation in Czech Republic. And I hope I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the young people in Czech Republic are simply undecided. They are confused because of the influx on social media, on TikTok especially. This election campaign was very active on social media, exactly. And I think with this influx of all information from different parties, the students still feel they are not understood, and that the language that this sort of communication that they would need is actually resonate with is simply missing. So this is shortly about the general mood. I think maybe some guys decided, maybe not, but I think also some students that were voting said that they were mainly deciding on what parties their parents are going to vote. So it's also the same situation with the young people.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I will just maybe complement the picture because my impression is, in my family, I have a younger brother and my wife also a younger sister. So they are in the age when they are looking for housing and so on. And you see that after 4 years of this government, many things are just not accomplished. They are not sort of finished. If you have a look at the housing crisis, and I will call it a housing crisis, it's really very profound, and people are really paying a price for this. I think you have other topics that are high on the agenda for the young people, the green issues and stuff like that. These are also long-term unanswered, unaddressed. So I think there are many questions, to this government for the young people, from the young people. But what Petr rightly sort of characterized is that you have on the other side, let's face it. If you have a look at the program of Andrej Babiš, it's just like domestically throwing money at everything. You have young people, mortgages. I will figure out. You have pensioners. I will figure out. Basically a social welfare package for everybody, really counting for hundreds of billions, of Czech crowns for annual budget, destroying completely any kind of sensibility in this, so that's no alternative, so to say. So many people are disillusioned, and then we discussed briefly with Petr before we started about the motoristen. So to at least the male part of the young electorate, this might be actually appealing for this macho culture, and having the car and the girl with that and stuff like that, So this very simplistic, sort of answers to how people can live, how they can do better in life and things like that, So that's what also under the impression of social media, indeed, what some, I don't want to exaggerate it, but you saw the motorist actually on the student polls, some fall for this actually. So that's unlike addressing the real questions, and Petr mentioned some of those taxes, the longer term future housing. I would definitely add to this. There's no answer from anybody, actually. Anybody. I was following this, and there was a press conference 2 weeks before the elections by the ruling party government parties in the parliament. This is what we will do after 4 years. Come on. So that's actually something where we are, and many people are like, okay, not good enough, but where else to go? So that's actually a big question mark for many, I think.
Thank you. And you mentioned social media and TikTok. So I'd also be interested to know, because obviously in a lot of elections, the concern has been influence, especially from Russia, disinformation, misinformation, foreign manipulation. So to what extent is this a threat? I'd leave this one.
Petr, do you want to jump in? And
just a very short comment on this. Well, actually, I think it's not the main concern in Czechia right now that the result of the whole process of the national election, that it should be somehow harmed by these type of activities. But I have to say that I'm not much focused on this, so probably Pavel will be more competent in this.
Thanks, Petr. So I think there are like two lines that we see actually in this. You of course have the longer term efforts of malign actors such as Russia actually putting some of these ideas that Kamila already described, and they are very often picked by the anti-systemic parties migration, Ukraine. These are anti-European agenda, Green Deal, really scoring very high in this and following this sort of Eurosceptic nature of the Czech society, capitalizing on this actually. So these are some of the longer term narratives, and there was one quite interesting actually on the top of those, and these are attacks against some of the key representatives of the state insecurity domain. People representing and working for Czech Stratcom, disinformation teams, hybrid threats, and things like that. These are really now also targeted, by smear campaigns and things like that. So that's actually yet another layer. I think maybe a little new actually to what we used to have in the past. Also, since these institutions, some of those at least, only emerged over the past 4 years, for example, Czech Stratcom and so on. So these are, so to say, new targets. But so this is the longer term sort of influence and the ongoing information sort of operations that are there for many years, I would say. But what is somehow new, and I think we should also dedicate some attention to this. This is just a revelation from this weekend actually, when one of the Czech NGOs and monitoring centers actually discovered that there have been quite somehow sophisticated efforts happening on TikTok, sponsored by Russia, promoting the far right and far left candidates. To some degree, also the ruling party, surprisingly, as I listened to this just yesterday. But most significantly, these are candidates of SPD and Stachilo, above all. And they have been really having quite some audience. TikTok is not so big as in Romania. It's around 2.5 million people, actually, when compared to maybe more than 9 million in Romania, more than half of the nation in Romania. This is the number of users, at least. In Czechia, it's still rather small, rather significant. There was quite a lot of cautiousness, actually. The Czech cyber bureau actually warned against this. TikTok is now forbidden, actually, on the devices operated by state officials, for example, things like that, actually. But that also doesn't mean that the political parties and the candidates, they don't use that themselves, despite seeing this danger. It's a platform operated by China, for God's sake. But still, we have that. And actually, what we have been seeing is a coordinated activity on probably 24 of accounts promoted by bot and troll farms, reaching some really stark and dark numbers, actually. In terms of the audience and followership. So, of course, we shouldn't over-exaggerate the impact of those campaigns, but since I think what was significant on the map of the elections or the polls, you had two parties that are oscillating on yes or no, enter or no, actually into the parliament. And this is for Stachilo and this is for motorists. So if this campaign helps those groups actually to overcome the 5% threshold, the damage can be already done. So in that sense, there is already quite an intense negotiations with the platform. In that case, TikTok, through the Czech Telecommunication Bureau, through the European Commission, also the Czech Secret Services and Counterintelligence. They are also involved in this. So there is quite an effort actually to isolate this and diminish the influence of this as much as possible. It is by far not to the extent that we have seen in Romania. It's much smaller in scale, but of course it's a similar pattern of behavior that we have seen in Romania, partially also in Germany, and we need to be cautious about that. It doesn't have the power to sway the whole result. It will not force Arnold to drop from around 30% to 10 or something. No, but it can really have some interesting push where it might actually help some of the anti-systemic forces, especially, in that case, above all, the far left coalition of Stachilo. Yeah.
I'd like to open up to questions from the audience, both online and offline in a minute. But first, Kamila, perhaps you can also add something about maybe you've noticed something on social media that you can comment on.
Actually, nothing more to add about disinformation in social media because I just recently read the report investigation done by Zdislava Pokorna. and also they included the information from your study.
Yes.
I think there was enough good obvious things said, but still at the same time, I think if we want the most vulnerable, which I mean children, to protect from the influence from far right parties or left parties, I think the media literacy subjects programs at school are essential. So to teach the kids to educate them how to use the sources to find out does it come from, what is the resource, how much trust can you see in the article. So verifying information is very important. So I think that would be, I think, my advice on how to fight the discrimination.
Yeah, I think it's good advice. Yeah, Pavel.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Not to speak too much, but two small remarks. Definitely underscore what Kamila mentioned, so important. But we also stand up for the systemic solutions. So digital regulation, that's actually something that we have not by far implemented. Czechia still did not implement the Czech National Adaptation Law, the Digital Services Act. We are already we are about to face fines for this. We are long overdue, and this is actually something that yet another time can provide some safety net and systemic level of protection also for the young people, for for children and many others. So that's actually one of the problems. And then another one that I also wanted to shed some light on. We in the association have been working on yet another case in which we discovered that there is quite a massive inflow of content that has been coming from the originally sanctioned Russian resources. You can imagine Russia Today, Sputnik, and others. Translated content then migrating to the Czech information space and landing at some of the disinformation sites. And unfortunately, despite our calls and other also calls, very little has happened so far. So we see massive inflow of that kind of content, also interfering in the information domain, normally not being allowed at all, actually, under huge fines, not to be there at all displayed, despite the translation bit. But so far, little action has taken place, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. So are there any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Günther Fellinger. I run the Austrian NATO campaign, and Czech Republic has been very, very active to support Ukraine. Thanks a lot. It's wonderful. Now, how to understand the present political crisis in the Czech Republic? Is it part of this Russian Orban-driven kind of political rollback campaign, which they have been very successfully now running since 2022 in Hungary, then of course Slovakia, they lost in Romania, they won in Poland. Will they win now in the Czech Republic? And how much is it possible to connect Mr. Pavis to Putin in order to make this not happening? The small additional question, because I'm an economist as well, campaign since many years for the Czech Republic to join the Eurozone. Question is here, 2024 was a chance, and this is now similarly this kind of Eurosceptic Mr. Pirla and the ODS, which has basically lost his chance to go united in these elections because he has blocked the Eurozone entry in 2024. Is there a chance that he will somehow see the light and when he will be hopefully re-elected to join the Eurozone with the Czech Republic in 2027?
Okay, so if I may start with the second part of the question, which is the Eurozone. So basically, I think in the current Czech discussion, in the current Czech society, because it's not just about the politicians and the parties. The Czech society, I think it has been the most Eurosceptical in the whole EU for a long time. I think in the past, the first place it was occupied by the UK. But if you look at the if you look at the timeline, so the Czechs, in many cases, in many years, were in the second place, and I think in the current numbers, I would say that we are at first. So basically, the Czech society is one of the most Eurosceptical even if not the most Eurosceptical in the whole EU, which makes it very difficult to even launch some kind of realistic discussion about joining the Eurozone. We could have a long discussion about who we should blame. In my view, it is definitely the politicians, and especially the politicians from the Civic Democrats. It is definitely the case, because if you look at this in the economic terms, it made no sense that we are not the members. It made no sense. It made no sense because basically, with the degree of dependence of the which Czech national economy or the Czechia as a country, how it is dependent on the development in the Eurozone, it made no sense that we have no chance to shape the development there. But for the political reasons, I would say it would be impossible for future 5 or 10 years to even start the kind of serious discussion about joining the Eurozone. So this is the first thing. The second one is about the Czech assistance or the Czech positions concerning Ukraine and the ties, like the ties between Mr. Babiš and Mr. Putin. Well, it would be easy to blame Mr. Putin for each bad pattern or each bad line in the politics or in the Czech politics, because it is very cheap. It is very cheap, and to my surprise, you hear this in many newspapers, in many discussions, that something wrong which is happening is because of Mr. Putin, or it is like because of Russia. It's not the case, because if you look at the Czech numbers, if you look at the Czech voters, if you look at the Czech society, we have had there in the past, in the current days, and we will have most likely this in the future, not that marginal groups of people, of voters, who tend to sympathize with Mr. Putin and with Russia. So basically, it's something which is in a way deeply rooted in the Czech society, in the Czech culture, in the Czech kind of a mental, I would say, Czech mental map, that we should cooperate with Russia, that the real threat comes from the West, and just name it. So it's not just, I would say, it's not just like because of disinformation, of campaigns, or of Mr. Putin. It's partly, and this part is not that small as we would like to have it, it's partly because of us. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I maybe just add to this? Actually, thanks for the question and all your efforts. Also, one day we hope to see Austria in NATO, of course, and support your efforts in this, to have this kind of neighborhood also more secure that we are living in. But on Eurozone, as Petr mentioned, we entered really a paradoxical situation. So this past government, post 2021. 4 out of 5 governing parties were in favor of Europe, right? But it never happened. One of the limitations was also what Petr described: very, very low popularity of this statement of the next step. So we couldn't even agree on some of the practical elements, So very little, too little, too late, if you ask me. And unfortunately, this will continue, and this issue will go even further away. And unfortunately, what I'm sort of expecting is that we will go more existential on these issues. We spoke about the EU, parties questioning EU, so we will go back again, asking ourselves, okay, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing, that Czechia is in the EU? Unfortunately, we are nearing, or for me, I'm proud of this actually, but for some, unfortunately, we will be sort of entering this period in which Czechia will finally become the net contributor to the EU budget. That will be around 2028, and this will again pour more oil on the fire. Okay, how is this beneficial? We are even paying to the budget, For many, many years, the Czech politicians especially presented EU as a milking cow. This is what gives us money. That's why it's good for us. But if you simplify to this degree and this logic changes, you are having a very thin ice and a big problem. How do you communicate about the EU onwards, post that point, So we will very soon, within this cadence of the future government, we will enter this terrain, and I'm worried, what a potential government composed of ANO plus some extreme forces, anti-systemic forces will do about this, right? We can answer the question for ourselves. So Petr mentioned about this government of national betrayal. I don't think we are nearly there. And what made me once again proud and happy was that since the start of the full-scale invasion, the support for the EU increased, and it rather stabilized around still 60% or 55 to 60%. It's not huge, in Poland, Hungary, you have more than 80% maybe or something, despite that kind of government in Hungary or Slovakia. We are not nearly there. But of course, at least the external threat somehow helped stabilize some of these phenomena, despite the constantly low-ranking popularity. And maybe finally on Babiš and Putin, Babiš is often characterized as a friend of Putin. I don't go that far, I have to say. We have other people who could be potential allies of Babiš. These are people that would not be afraid to go to Moscow, do whatever. I don't see that. Also, why? Because, and here I a bit disagree with you, Petr, actually, because I don't see in Czechia, and some of the polls showed that sort of hardcore fans of Putin and Kremlin and of current politics, they are only negligible, few percents. But what I see much more is this anti-systemic, anti-EU, anti-Ukraine camp. And these are people that are somewhere there. They will not praise Putin publicly and say, look, he's the best guy on this planet, and what he's doing is right. But they will be, but look what the bloody Ukrainians have been doing here in Czechia, and so on and so on. So they will go like this, they will go close, but to price openly and say Russia is great and Putin is great, this is another level. What, for example, happened after the 24th of February 2022 was that even the far-right party of Tomio Okamura, he went through his personal profile and profile of his party and deleted every single mention of Putin being the great guy and great politician. Why? Because of such a profound refusal of this kind of politics, and really people helping, opening their hearts and minds, and also physical flats, hosting the Ukraine refugees. It was one of the euphoric moments. Yes, we are already in this, again, fatigue phase and all that, but it will be very hard to turn the Czech society in Putin fechters and friends of Putin. I dare to say. I might be too optimistic on this, but I would say that it's more rather this questioning, questioning of the EU leadership, questioning of Germany, questioning of, Ukraine, and our support to it, and Babiš knows that as well. So he doesn't go that far as say, look, Russia good, but he will say, look, I put our people first. That's the slogan. That's the motto. Our people need to go first. He doesn't say Ukraine should go second, but he say our people first, And he also says, look, we will review things that help Ukraine, like the ammunition initiative, for example. And we are very critical because it really put and keeps Czechia on the map of this strong support for Ukraine. We are there, thankfully. And Babiš now says, look, maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe NATO should do it. But NATO is not equipped to do these kind of things. It should remain the Czechia's doing. But there will be a big discussion about it post-election. So that's where I stand on this. And of course, there are big question marks. If we are back to questioning, is EU and NATO good for us? And there are different movements proposing the referendum on these kinds of issues, then there will be a big problem. But of course, and in this sense, Czechia is quite deep, developed democracy with a very robust constitutional system. It's not just one chamber like in Slovakia or Hungary, we have the upper chamber, we have a president that has been standing on the right side of history, and he already publicly pronounced, look, I will not be signing just automatically nominations for minister that are questioning all of what we are discussing here today. So people that are calling for Czechzit, they will, based on his initial comments and something that he put on the table, he doesn't want them to become ministers. It's already a clear sign of where the government should be on this, So that's already yet another system of check and balance, here. And it will not be easy to do these kind of things by far. But simply having this kind of existential debate once again, it's already detrimental and dangerous enough to me.
Do we have other questions? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for your contributions and insights. I have another question concerning rather the strategic dimension or strategic foresight of this outgoing Czech government. Because notwithstanding very actual severe shortcomings in the realization of certain policies, wasn't the government also just too ingenuous from the outset, not reaching out enough to this other bloc of the Czech electorate and making all of the Czech public understand that like implementing all these policies that would be necessary to ease these bread and butter issues. I mean, a housing crisis cannot be solved within 4 years. It's just not realizable. But it would have been necessary from the outset to sincerely communicate what the plan could be in a long run, I guess. But was there no attempts, or if there were any, were they just not really heartfelt? How do you assess this level?
Okay, so if I may, I would make 2 points on this. The first one is concerning the communication between the cabinet and especially Mr. Babiš. Well, it was very difficult because in 2021 the whole campaign was about Mr. Babiš. So basically, it was very polarized. It was very personalized, and I think this made things very, very difficult. So if you look at the past 4 years, you would find just a few bills, a small number of new legislation which was created in cooperation between the government and the opposition. So this is the first thing that like during the whole 4 years, the past 4 years, the Czech politics, in a sense, if I would have to use a kind of a metaphor, so it was a kind of a cold civil war. The second point is that the coalition itself was very, very broad. So basically, it included parties from what we could describe as the central left liberals, the Pirate Party, to the far right conservatives, in some extent, these civic Democrats. And basically, for the cabinet, it was very difficult, even for the cabinet, to create a compromise on certain issues. So, and then the third issue was that the cabinet was forced to rather react to the things which it had very difficult to somehow shape, especially the war. So in this, I could imagine that certain things could have been done differently, but a huge portion of them, in my view, it's the cabinet had a very limited space to, in a way, maneuver, I'd say.
I will take it from there, just subscribing to what Petr mentioned, and mention probably 2 things that indeed, and this is quite special. I don't know, maybe if the situation is similar to in Austria. I just don't have the time to follow the politics so closely. But if you compare, for example, the situation in Poland or the Baltic countries, you have quite a cross-party consensus on some of the fundamental issues, like Russia being a threat. And have a look what you saw and listened to today, right? You have parties that just want to normalize relations with Russia, like the far right and far left. So that's really beyond imaginable in some of those countries, right? So that's actually something that just illustrates how little there is of consensus on some of these fundamental issues. Petr spoke about breaking the consensus from the 90s, right? The coming back to Europe, coming back to the West, EU, NATO. These have been largely consensual issues for many decades. I dare to say, right? So and now we are much more radical. Even the SPD, the Czech SPD, the far right party, still a couple of years ago, still probably for the last European Parliament election, they didn't say, look, we won't go out of the EU. They were, and even today they say, look, we want to have a referendum, and if people decide, maybe it's a good idea to leave EU. Statual is much more hardcore on this, but anyway, things are getting more radical, in that sense. So in that environment, to make a lot of consensual politics, it's very hard. And definitely Petr mentioned about just a very few bills. So in that sense, for example, the president have been doing some great work actually in the run-up to the latest NATO summit. He called for all the leaders actually and tried to establish some basic elements of consensual approach, when it comes to also the massive investment that will be needed, for our security defense. So we have tried to be the bridge builder, but it will be very hard to maintain this, for him, and he will very soon appear after a lot of pressure, unfortunately. So this is also part of that. So it's very hard to do consensual politics, but I definitely agree with you that we are missing this on some of these essential issues. We and the government definitely could have tried harder. They have done a little bit for sure. We spoke about the system of strategic communication, trying to communicate about some of these issues, but with a rather limited reach, to the society and really across the party line. And we see on many elements a very diverse politicization of certain issues, even those that used to be consensual. For example, approach to the army and perception of the army. It used to be a consensual issue, whoever you ask, even going to the current ruling parties and the anti-systemic movements, such as SPD. And today, it really depends on who you ask, on the perception and performance, how they assess the role of the Czech armed forces, for example. It hasn't been the case still maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So it's getting worse, in that sense, So, and the party line is more visible on some of these issues, So there were attempts. I don't think we got nearly where we were supposed to, but the honest, the real question to me is actually if it was even achievable since the beginning. But, and this is my last point on this, it was quite an interesting thing to hear and listen to the Czech politicians who, from the current ruling party, who said, look, and I spoke about it at the beginning, right? So when we came to power in 2021, it was a different world, Definitely for us, for this part of the world, definitely for Ukraine, And we came to offices with all of these lofty promises, right? So we want to do this and that. And part of the reason is definitely what Petr described. It just proved to be so hard, right? If you are to agree with 5 different political groupings on one issue, for example, on housing, it's just too hard, And many of these issues were just simply blocked within the government because of lack of consensus. But at the same time, many people and politicians from the top level, leaders of the political parties, they say, look, probably in 2022, we were supposed to do sort of a major coming out. We promised you this, but we are living in a different world. And we should really revise the whole agenda that we are having for you. We will not be able to deliver on this. We were voted in with a completely different first mandate and in a different environment. So it's impossible. So many politicians nowadays reflect on this actually, which is quite interesting, and it brings us to the very beginning of our discussion.
Thank you. Botina, are there any questions online?
Yeah, one question online from Karl. So in the summer, President Pavel said appointing a
Can you speak up maybe?
yeah, sorry. In the summer, President Pavel said appointing a defense or foreign minister who questions Czech membership in NATO or in the EU will be a red line. Even so, refusing a ministry appointment is constitutionally problematic and has a long history among other presidents. Could this be a move to appoint more of a professional diplomat rather than a radical politician?
Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Okay, so if I may start. Sorry. So, and basically, I think this question leads partly to what we could have a kind of an estimate in terms of how the upcoming elections, how they like what they will produce in terms of the results. And in this my guess is that most likely we could expect a kind of a minority cabinet of Mr. Havish with some non-partisan members. And in my view, these non-partisan members, these kind of experts, these might be the people who would be placed on these positions. So, in my view, we would not expect, or at least I would not expect that some radicals could be appointed as like the foreign ministers or the defense ministers, because I think that Czech politics has not come like so far. And basically, I think that the names or the exact appointments, it won't be the most problematic part of the new coalition forming.
Maybe just one sentence on what I assume to come out of this election, and we actually in the session we did sort of like scenarios or different variants of what can happen, and actually one of those plays with the nomination issue. So if theoretically we have a minority government by ANO with some others supporting this, to have sort of more ideological and political persons, or to have more technocrats, sort of experts, from those parties, this can be actually a differentiating factor in that sense. And the ideology or politics actually within this, or having professional diplomat, might actually be an interesting element in this, and would contribute to more of continuity and fewer ruptions in terms of the current foreign security setup. But another remark is actually that the Ministry of Defense, I can very well imagine that Andrej Babiš will like to keep the grip on it, because there will be major investment going in that direction. The whole military procurement, which is a topic that the movement actually thematized, and also something that really means the external representation. Andrej Babiš, I think he's not a person that doesn't care about how others are looking at him. He still wants to have some level of respect, from the European partners, international partners. He really wants to maintain good relations with the White House for sure. He also used to profile on this Czech MAGA camp, so he used to wear this cap, red cap, you remember, right? So that's actually something that he will be cautious. And for sure, some of these issues, namely in EU and also foreign policy, he will be able to maybe take with him to the office of the Czech government under his command, under his leadership, But on defense, this is much more problematic. So that's why I think he will be very cautious to, for example, let go this post of Minister of Defense for any even smaller potential coalition partner or an external nominated expert. So that's my just very general at this point. We are still seeing quite a lot of options and turbulences ahead, but this is my assumption at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sure there's more we could talk about, but we have okay, we're at the end of the discussion. I would just very, very quickly like to ask you, what's your prediction? Who will be in the next government?
Petr, please start.
Okay, it's like $1 million question as usual.
Yeah.
It's the last one. So as I said a couple of minutes ago, I think that we will have a minority cabinet, which will be led by Mr. Babiš, which will consist of his ministers and some of non-partisan kind of technocrats, which could make life easier for him because he could possibly rely on broader support. So this is my prediction. But the second thing is that this process, it won't be easy. It won't be quick, and I think it will take a couple of months of negotiation before we have
Yes.
a new cabinet in Czechia.
Thanks, Petr, for starting this. I would largely agree with this, but I think it's so important actually to have the map in front of us. So what are all the parties and movements present? If there is the full house, so to say, all of those, I think Andrej Babiš would not be against having motorists in the government directly. He would just place probably one or two key figures. Mr. Turek, probably the Minister of Transport, he would be okay with this. I'm sure maybe Mr. Matsinka, the leader of the party, some other maybe irrelevant post, just to place them there. But he will be definitely cautious about inviting the far right into the government. He doesn't like their representatives. There's a bad blood, bad chemistry between Babiš and Tomio Okamura, the leader of the far right party. With the far left, he used to have some experience. He used to be in government with them, actually, with Social Democrats directly, with the Communists indirectly. They were externally supporting the government. So he knows them. And I think he more or less could assume that they would be a good partner, either directly or indirectly from the government. He knows that to have the anti-establishment parties has some costs on sort of reputation and external representation. But I think if he has a strong mandate, maybe more than 30%, very strong leadership, he might actually be at least feel confident to manage the whole situation. The big question mark that I have is over far right. And under the current constellation, he would need all of those actors actually to support him to have a rather stable cabinet. Just one of the partners would not be enough. So it would still need to be quite a wide spectrum of actors. And I think Babiš is afraid of having similar fragmentation that, for example, Robert Fico has now. That especially the far right, the nationalists, they crumble. You need to corrupt the individual members, of those parties to remain loyal to you, and so he will probably try to avoid this. And maybe I will also offer it to you like a wild card, maybe if you allow. And this is actually a wild card following Petr's logic that this negotiation will not be easy, and we might very well result in a situation in which no stable government, maybe playing with the figures, playing with the mandates, no stable option will be on the table. And then instead of facing early elections, it might be actually the swap and sort of incorporation of one of the existing parties from the ruling party government. If we see Christian Democrats, also they used to be in one government in the past together. There are speculations about ODS, the Civic Democrats, at least part of it, actually one wing of the party, potentially. So I think we cannot exclude it. I think we can rather safely exclude this for the first shot, but maybe for the second round, potentially, resulting from this instability, I think you could have more maneuvering space.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And yes, so I'd also like to thank you for joining us online and offline. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to our newsletter. We're on social media. Become an IDM member. Also, thank you to Faustine for the technical support. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.